So namaste, good evening, and welcome to the Blub World Web Talks. A very warm welcome to all the speakers for today, and a very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 83rd episode. In the last 82 episodes, more than 1,000 school leaders have participated on this very platform, shared their ideas, opinions, perceptions, observations, and innovations that they are doing within their ecosystems, and specifically in the K-12 segment, or simply schools. And some of the best ideas that these people have shared with us, we've shared them on our social media, on the white papers that we've published till now, so that these ideas can be replicated, experimented, and seen whether they are feasible, scalable, and usable for schools around the globe. Just before we begin this interaction, they gave a very amazing assignment to their students because they did not have good internet in their place. So they told students to create a custom dictionary at home where they had to add 5 new words every day and bring that dictionary to school once the school reopens. One of the schools in Sundarbans in Odisha, again a very small place, gave an assignment to make a wisdom diary at home where they have to list what all good and bad did they do in their whole day. One school started an activity called a time balance sheet. They told their students to make a balance sheet of time and consider time as currency. And kids did amazingly well with this activity. So the schools have been innovating amazingly during this lockdown to keep learning and teaching going on. Today, post the NEP, now we have a new era of education happening in India with the higher education segment, the K-12 and all the sectors right now experiencing, learning and trying to understand the new national education policy, which wants it to be India-centric. हम वापस से अपनी इंडियन एथनिसिटी की प्राइड को जीने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं through this policy. Through we are trying to understand the regional language importance, the lok vidya importance, the folk knowledge importance, बहुत सारी चीजें, and going back to where it all started, going back to our roots, trying to understand is learning more important than language? Because India as a country is obsessed by English, and when we talk of English, तो हमारी learning and हमारे dreams and हमारा सोचना never happens in English. It happens in Hindi or the regional language, and then we do a lot of translation in our brains. Today, we are here to discuss on what all skilling goals should be there for schools, because the new education policy or the new national education policy talks a lot about skilling students on economically viable skills. So what kind of skills do we need in the future citizen? And to tint to it, we have 2 or 3 amazing media professionals who will share their take on how do they think that the media skills or the sector, media industry or media professionals will impact the school education system. Because now media skills are a basic requirement in every teacher's life. Because now everybody faces a camera every single morning for 4 to 5 hours a day for their virtual classroom. So now everybody is trying to be a celebrity. You can engage a student. Engaging a student is a big, big challenge. We had a behavioral scientist on this very platform who shared a recent research outcome that a student looking at a screen like this and trying to learn has an attention span of only 8 seconds. And on every 9th second, you lost it. So how do you keep these kids engaged, entertained, and ready to learn? So thank you so much once again, everybody, for joining us today. Let's welcome guests that we have today and listen to their amazing ideas on how do they think and what will be the skilling goals for the future. So let's listen to the first speaker for today, Mr. Sanjoy Roy, who's the Managing Director of Teamwork Arts Private Limited, and he's popularly known as the founder of the Jaipur Literature Festival, which is one of the biggest, I must say, one of the biggest gatherings of literary literary tasting people who like literature and want to read about it, listen to it, and have an opinion on it. And that's one of the biggest gatherings of the globe, which has the biggest number of these people together in a city like Jaipur, which was never considered to be an event destination and absolutely an event IP destination for that sake. So let's have Sanjay ji's opinion on what does he think will be the skilling goals for schools in the coming times. Over to Sanjay ji.
Thank you so much, Daksh, and good afternoon and good evening to everybody, wherever you may be. I am today fortunate to be speaking to you all from the countryside in Goa. It's raining outside, it's beautiful. And I think what Zoom and our new digital world has taught us is that we don't have to be physically present in any one place to be able to be connected. So I think that's the first education that all of us have to take on board for young people as to how do you make yourself presentable, what's the life skill requirement in terms of communication in today's day and age. I just want to begin, while of course the national education policy has many positives, there's some very good things that have been built into the program. I do want to sort of also, for a second, just caution everybody before they blindly move forward that there are some inherent challenges. The biggest challenge that I feel that we will all have to look at for the future is, as Daksh was saying, the earlier chasm was if you knew English or if you didn't. If you had access to English and you went to public schools or universities like all of us here on this call, in some way you were connected and that allowed you to move forward. The new chasm that's been created is bandwidth. Do you have bandwidth? Do you have access? Or do you not have access? And that bandwidth chasm is going to be a huge challenge. It's not easy. I know my experience, I also wear a hat of being a founder of the Salam Balak Trust. It's an organization working with street children in Delhi. We have 9,500 children a year. Our children right now are suffering because we don't have enough smartphones, PCs, laptops, iPads to be able to get a class across to our kids. So that's our biggest challenge as of now, and I see that going into the future. The second challenge is we know that even as we want to become Atmanirbhar and self-sufficient and go back to our roots, well, I personally don't think that our roots went any place, and I believe that each one of us, the family is the root today for any child, for any society. And as long as you continue to be able to experience the culture and tradition within that context, you're pretty much rooted to your world and to your language, whatever that language will be. Today, the more languages that we speak, and Daksh, I would say, let's refer to them as Indian languages rather than regional languages, because today Bengali may be a regional language, but it's the seventh largest spoken language across the world. Tamil, as you know, is one of the largest languages, and it's spoken in America, it's spoken in Europe, it's spoken in Australia. So no more can we say regional languages are for regional people. So therefore, in this global interconnectedness, what is it that we need to teach young people? I would actually expand outside for a second of what we're talking about, and I beg your patience on this, Daksh. I want to take it out of just media and communication. For any education policy to be successful, the first thing that we need to inculcate in our young people is the joy of learning, the joy of knowledge, the need to be able to go out, use the internet as a leverage in the way of being able to learn everything there is, outside of your class curriculum. The class curriculum in India has stopped people from thinking. Jugaad has developed outside of the class curriculum. And in the issue of Jugaad, what's happened is Jugaad is seen as make do. I look at Jugaad as make possible, because you give an Indian the basic fundamentals of knowledge, education, and the thing of freedom to be able to think, the possibility, the quality of being able to realize his or her full potential, whatever that may be, cooking to being a professor to whatever. Therein, you will be able to create people who are equitable, who are successful, who are entrepreneurs, and go out and have a winning formula. Divyanshi has now put up both her hands, so I have to stop, and maybe I'll come back and expand on some of these issues, as well as the need to be able to understand civic rights and duties, our constitution, and issues around freedom. Over to you, Daksh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay Roy. To again summarize what you said, that now we cannot term languages as regional languages anymore. We need to term them as Indian languages. That's something very important, because now the new education policy and the new pedagogy that we need to implement must be multilingual. And it's also promoting that we must have trilingual students. कम से कम 3 languages सीखने की कोशिश जरूर कीजिए within the curriculum. Try to bring them to the class and give them the right kind of respect that's needed, and early education to simply focus on the mother tongue of the student for teaching and learning, because that's what makes the brain work in the right manner. Because no, don't put a lot of stress on translating the subject matter into a language that you aspire for. Let it be in the language that the kid understands, and let language just play the role of communication. There should again be a joy of learning that has to be again brought in, because the biggest challenge the education sector is facing right now is that we do not have active learners. We have passive learners. We learn because we are supposed to. We don't learn because we want to. And now we actually need to have learners who want to learn, because there's one big challenge that has come in as far as the operationality of things is concerned, that in a virtual classroom like this, you do not know who the backbencher is. And then you don't know whether people are learning or not. Teaching might be happening, but learning, we're not sure about. And learning beyond the class curriculum, Jugaad, as a make possible technique of India, and again going back to our ethnic knowledge, and embracing Jugaad in all the ways and modes possible, and trying to create an equitable, much more successful society and group of citizens that we have in the future. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay Roy. Now let's invite the next speaker for today, who's somebody who has a prolific experience of nearly 25 plus years in the field of broadcast, news, television, reporting, journalism, somebody who brings in the experience of NDTV, Al Jazeera, and some of the most prolific brands that you've all seen on TV. Let's have his take on what does he think, that how will media education, media skills, and media professionals change the skilling goals for schools. A very warm welcome to Mr. Chetan Sharma, who's the founder of Edumate.tv and former business editor NDTV and head for Al Jazeera India. A very warm welcome, Chetan ji. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Daksh. The most popular line to start any conversation on Zoom is, am I audible? So, am I audible? Absolutely, all right. Good to know that. It's great to speak along with old friends like Sanjoy. And of course, I've envied Sanjoy for several reasons, given his illustrious background. But today, my special envy is because he's sitting in Goa and I'm not. And I am still in the sultry version of Delhi. So, enjoy yourself wherever you are.
Come on over, Chetan.
Right. So, I think I completely endorse most of what Sanjoy said particularly about the joy of learning and highlighting the digital divide, which is now another division, possibility, and threat in our society, which already has been divided for several reasons, on factors of economy, on factors of politics, and factors of social reasons and cultural reasons as well. So I think this new sinister threat of a digital divide is what looms large. But let's, like all of us, let's focus on the positivity and the possibilities. I think the NEP as a start was announced as an alter of the HRD ministry to the Ministry of Education. To my mind, that was the start of a misnomer, because the first time there's a policy that aims not just at education, but the entire gamut of human resource development. So I couldn't see the reason for that, but I endorse and I completely, support the holistic approach to education, the 360-degree character building process that we've talked about, the need to expand the lens beyond structured curriculum and predictable careers, and reviving India's famed Gurukul approach. Of course, they've done this with the aim of a self-reliant India, and they've chosen to address the critical needs of employment and employability. They've offered a creative mix of flexibility and focus that throughout the entire learning life, which also is welcome. They've chosen to empower the teachers very critically, to enhance transparency and accountability through leaner governance, which is also welcome. In its entirety, it's truly a policy that's got the makings of a clear 2020 vision. But over the last 30 days, I've had about 50 webinars across the country. And the one critical point that's been brought out, that's always been the bane of this country, is never policy making. It's always the implementation of the policy. And that's where the big question mark lies. And everybody has only and only objected to whether this is possible to be implemented, given the fact that a large part of this policy is old wine in a new bottle. And just for a start, this country has advocated the need to have free and compulsory education to the age of 16. We haven't even reached halfway, over 70 years of independence. So we can have policies galore, but if we're not able to implement it, makes it actually counterproductive. So, but that having been said, I think why I do salute you, Daksh, for having chosen the topic of skilling in schooling as an important imperative for the way forward, is that whatever you talk, you may blame the government for not implementing, but this is one area where you can take control of things in your hands. And I think that's why this is a very critical subject. You talked about media and marketing and mass communication. There has, been a lot of skepticism about the future of media, particularly because whenever you have a slowdown, the first thing that gets taken off the balance sheet is advertising and travel. And both the industries have been hit hard, not just post-COVID, it was continuing from pre-COVID, because the slowdown had started, about almost 20 months ago. But that having been said, the fact is that if we're going to look at a more connected world, a more educated world, a more opinionated world, then the role of media becomes far more critical and far more nuanced. So I think the opportunities in media and mass comm itself are immense. Of course, media will be consumed in a different manner, but it will be, the role of it will be enhanced. Now, when I say everything, and I think what Sanjoy was also mentioning, that everything in life is meant to be simple. It's we as human beings who complicate it. And when you talk about the joy of learning, it has to be kept simple, right? But the more you complicated it, the more you make it biased for certain sections of society that have access to it in the past. And that's where a greater divide develops. So I think it's very important to consider that inclusiveness in the entire education spectrum as one of the caveats to this policy. Now, we were as students of marketing, we were taught the 4 Ps, of Kotler: the product, price, the place, and the promotion. This got extended to the people, processes, physical evidence. I think it's not as much media and communication that's important as the 8th P to all this, and that's presentation. I think that's, you were alluding to that now, because we're in a different kind of a world of communication. Presentation gets challenged, which is true. And in the good old days, media and rather education was focused in theory. Then it got the need to become more practical. Then it got the need to become more visual. Now it's got the need to become more techno-visual. Now, while this does at some stage compromise with what the basics of, let's say, of learning are, in the sense, let's say language, for instance. Today, you can compromise grammar and spelling in language through short forms and through visual representations. And I've seen people do that very creatively. I mean, when they don't understand the spelling, they don't want to use a word because it's very big, and they perhaps don't understand the meaning. They use just a simple, a picture to represent that. That's an easy and a creative way out, but it's also taking away at some place the need to learn the language and entirely explore the beauty and leverage the language. There is a give and take, but presentation by and large is something that's critical. That's not just in media, it's in everyday life. So I think that is something that needs to be creatively skilled in the classes 9 to 12 is what you were talking about, wherein of course a lot of things that you learn is basics in media, is skills of writing, skills of speaking, skills of presentation, skills of dressing, skills of taking your camera angle, all become very important. But let me tell you that these semantics do play a very critical role, but these are roles of enhancement. The core is of how to engage with people. And the core of engagement in teaching can only come through storytelling. The more you give live examples and you tell stories to your students and encourage them to respond to you with questions, right? And make it a two-way process, that is what will actually, in fact, invoke the sense of learning which you talked about, rather than just teaching. And also, bring out the joy of learning is what Sanjoy was talking about. And when you talk about skilling, I think it's important to also consider, and I'll make this my last point, if I'm not, I think I am overstretching myself, is that skilling for whom is important? Is it skilling for the student or the teacher? And from my point of view, I think the skilling for the teacher is more critical and more difficult, because from the student's point of view, he's just learning. From the teacher's point of view, he's first unlearning and then relearning, makes it a double process. And I think that's something that needs to be focused on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chetanji, to add that amazing perspective. To summarize what you said, that the sinister divide of digital divide, that's going to be there, and that's absolutely there. What we can feel right now in a country like India, where 55,000 villages don't have network access, not even internet, don't have network access, and with only 25% percolation of internet in the rural India, and where we are trying to create an education ecosystem that's not there as far as the modern education system is concerned. The traditional and folk knowledge system is there, but as far as the modern education system is concerned, the epicenter of rural education is something that's called a midday meal, and that cannot be delivered virtually. And that's where we are seeing a very big breakdown of the current education system in the rural India. And teacher empowerment is something that the policy has actually done. Policy implementation is the biggest challenge, because the Indian education elephant does not move so easily. So the policy is just an advisory, a suggestion. It's still not a legislation, and every state will have its own take on the policy, that what they want to take and what they want to reject. So there's going to be a lot of confusion in the air for some more time. And the execution is, again, a big mammoth challenge in itself. NEP is an old wine in a new bottle. That's something that's very similar to people who have been looking at the whole education segment for a long time, because they've seen these kind of reforms being proposed a lot, many times, and finally execution not happening. Role of media becomes much greater, and it has really become much, much greater, because if the virtual classroom is not entertaining or engaging enough, there is not this kind of security available at this point of time, where you can actually track what the student is doing on screen, whether he's in your class or not. You don't know that. Leveraging the language, this is something that has been focused in the NEP, and it should be focused, and we should use multiple Indian languages, regional languages, and different versions of it to keep children engaged. Core engagement comes from storytelling, and yes, storytelling or the story bias runs our human brains very well, and we should foster that, because that's the way we learn facts, and that's something, those learnings we carry for a very long amount of time, if there is a cause and effect relationship between the learning outcomes that we have. Making class a two-way process, that's something that a lot of people are trying, but it's very difficult in virtual classrooms. But yes, this would make it, again, much more engaging, and the learning outcome or the feedback mechanism would get better. So thank you so much, Chetanji, for adding your perspective. Let's now listen it from somebody who himself is a passed out or a graduate from Harvard, helped a lot of investment firms, had a very rosy and amazingly comfortable life in the US, left all those comforts to write a completely new story in a tier 3, tier 4 town of Rajasthan, after leaving all that and finally trying to change something that does not change so easily. Because if we say, and I must not use the word business, but I'm using it, in India, education is the most regulated business, and he's exactly trying to change that and trying to make some difference in the teaching learning process or the way India learns. Let's invite Mr. Manish Jain, who's the coordinator and founder of Shikshantar Andolan and co-founder of Swaraj University, who's trying to hack the education system for a very, very long time. Over to Manish ji, a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Dux. So good to be here with everyone today. I think when I was reading through the new education policy, it reminded me of some of the policy papers I used to write in UNESCO about 25 years ago. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because the words are all there. But I think as what's the meaning behind the word, what's the understanding around the word, behind the words is something we need to go more deeply into. And I would say the NEP is doomed to fail. I can say it right here for everyone, because there's a saying I would like to bring to your attention called adding wings to butterflies. Adding wings to caterpillars does not create butterflies. It creates more awkward and dysfunctional caterpillars. And when I'm saying that, I mean that what is basically the existing design and infrastructure and system is all in place. It's not being shaken at all. And what I'm saying, all of these great, my last 25 years has been dedicated to holistic learning, to creativity, to critical thinking, to regenerating wisdom, rebuilding empathy, compassion in society with learners. And this does not happen within the existing frameworks. That we like to talk about the design. So the same design of the school is the same design that was used to design the prison system, the factory system, and the army system. And the purpose of that was not a holistic learning process. It was actually a deep control and dumbing down of the population. And so I would like to say that, this opportunity though is in the technologies that are coming. With due regard, there is also these issues of divide, but I think the technology is not interesting, and from the online, it's actually an opening or a break in our thinking process. And many of the best educationists in the world would realize that learners are not empty, and learning is not a linear process. And this is what, unfortunately, an entire education system and its design is built on this idea that learners are empty. Let us keep pouring knowledge, into them. Let us make them into knowledge consumers rather than knowledge creators. And also they treat learning as a very linear process. I think the non-linearity of the digital world is actually quite disruptive for our mindsets, and actually can create some really interesting openings. A few other things related to the design, I think, which are missing in the policy and which are very important for us to consider if we really want to move in that direction. I mean, there's a lot of wishful thinking that, everybody is looking in every country around the world. I've worked in more than everybody is banking on the teacher as a Superman or superhero to come and fix and save everything. And this policy also makes the same error, I think, and it's really hinged on a teacher. What we see the technology is offering is actually for us to wake up to what we call self-designed learning. And the key element of self-designed learning is that it shifts from, a model that is based on extrinsic motivation, that is based on someone giving you external rewards and punishments and driving your learning, to something that is more intrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is a core, and I think that, again, a lot of the ways young people, I see them learning with the digital technologies is out of their own intrinsic questions, their own motivation, not out of somebody's homework assignments or some, if I don't do this, I'll be punished, but it's more their own questions that are there. And the other thing that's happening through this, I should say, I grew up, my childhood was in the US. I spent huge amount of my childhood playing video games. I have to confess that. And the thing with video games, that opens up a very interesting culture of peer-to-peer learning. And I think this peer-to-peer learning is something that, again, the people who wrote this policy don't have a very clear idea on. If we actually think, all of us, most of the useful things we've learned in life are from our friends and family, not from the school system. And so I think the peer-to-peer learning culture has to be built in. We have to move beyond a culture that is based on competition and compulsion as the two driving factors, to actually allowing a culture that can create more space for experiential learning, which they mentioned, but it's not, again, in the existing format, I don't see it happening very much. freedom to make mistakes is critical. If we what Sanjoy was, I've done a lot of research on trying to understand Jugaad, and in Jugaad, the fundamental, you're not, people who are great Jugaadis are always free to make mistakes, and we can celebrate those mistakes. And I think that the last thing I'll just say, and we can celebrate our failures. You know, I think this resilience is a critical thing that we need to build in the education system. It's so disappointing to see how many young people are going into depression, how many people are going into suicide, because they have not built that inner confidence, inner resilience to face difficult challenges. And so I think that is only, the more we experience the world, the more that actually happens. So I'm actually a believer, all of our designs are actually, the less time children spend in classrooms and the less time they spend online, they'll have much more learning happening in their lives. So we need to kind of flip the script in a sense. And the last thing I just want to say is that, you know, somebody was talking about roots. So I think the fundamental space for our roots is when we can reconnect to the land, to the soil, to the forest, to the rivers. We have fantastic experiments going on around this. And this actually is the reconnection to our fundamental creativity, to our sense of who we are. All of our ancient culture is built on a fundamental connection with nature. And the models that we have right now in place are disconnecting us from nature. So our own ability to become knowledge leaders, to become wise people, to become entrepreneurs, all of that requires a totally different model. We've worked out many of those models, which I can share in more detail, but just trying to add on to the existing system is just going to create more mess. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manishji. The NEP has typically come out as a new mobile handset, which we are trying to meddle around and trying to find the new features of it. And when Manishji comes in and says that the jargons are 25 years old and the terminology is not being understood with the spirit of the word, it's just being put there as part of policy. And yes, we need a lot of changes to happen. Learning is not a linear process. Knowledge consumers and not knowledge creators. And as of now, we need a lot of creation to happen, because that's what's going to engage the kids of Generation Y, because they're not so easy to engage, because we need video games to do that. And we cannot, and as of now, we do not have that in-depth gamification in the whole learning process. Self-designed learning is going to be the future for sure, because when we need active learners, we need them to drive their own motivation. The fear circuit won't work. The reward circuit might work, because as of now, we are using the fear circuit a lot to teach and to learn. With competition and compulsion, the only driving force as of now. But yes, it will find replacements in the coming time, because parents right now do realize, and even schools do realize, that we need to change the way we interact with students, because now the throttle or the control is in the student's hand. So we need to think of much more better ways to do that. Celebrating mistakes, freedom to make mistakes, getting disconnected from nature, and again, embracing Jugaad. Thank you so much, Manishji, for adding that amazingly revolutionary perspective to the whole discussion. Thank you so much. Let's now invite somebody.
Just wait, one thing, Dutch, I just wanted to add, which just because people will think that's easy for a Harvard guy to say all of these things. I would say that my understanding became so both so disturbing for me and so powerful for me that I decided, my wife and I decided never to send our children to school. So I have an 18-year-old daughter who's never been to school. Only time she stepped into school is like we take the children to the zoos to see the caged animals. My daughter has been to school to see the caged children. But her whole life she's been doing free learning. And I think that's what the future is to understand this deep free learning models and actually support more and more. And that will require very different design. We've done it also, free learning models with government school children, and it's shown fantastic results. I mean, mind-blowing results. Thank you, Dux.
It would need to be drastic, it would need to be dramatic, it would need to be revolutionary. Otherwise, this elephant of education won't move so easily. So let's find much more ways to engage, intrude, interpret, observe, and try to innovate the whole K-12 sector. Because if we improve that, we would be having much, much more better much more engaged, much more sustainable, much more responsible citizens in the future. So reading too, it's basically on this, habit of reading a lot of books, that reading too has become trendy with herd mentality. We read what others are reading and we miss out on good content, or what we say, we typically focus towards the popular content. How do we promote literature which is classic but lacks today's much needed engagement or the entertainment or the glamour cover to it? I think this question is actually to Dr. Sanjoy Roy.
Dakshin, I think again we need to look at what is literature. As Manish said and Chetan touched upon it, these are about stories. Stories connect us. Stories connect us across generations. Stories root us to our land and our tradition and our culture. And stories give us a sense of place, home, identity, and who we are. That's what a story does, whether it's popular, unpopular, it's irrelevant. I wouldn't get into this. There's a difference between the popular genre and the literary genre. Today, if you look at literature in its overarching way, the maximum amount of books that are being bought is in the non-fiction genre. So biographies, history, travel, science, technology, self-help, cooking, all of this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't get into, how do you persuade somebody to read A or B? I would just say, bring them up on a good staple diet of fabulous stories. Whether they read or not, even that's irrelevant. Tell them stories in your tradition, in your language, across languages. Give them the joy that reading provides. And the difference for all our colleagues on this call is that, remember, when we're on Zoom or any kind of OTT platform, Netflix or television, it's a one-way street. It gives you the entire picture and doesn't necessarily propel you to think. What a story or a book does is it opens your mind. And it opens your mind to many possibilities. It opens your minds to many truths. And as Manish rightly said, one of the biggest issues with curricular reading is that it locks your mind to a particular truth and then says that this is the truth and this is the only truth. Whereas in the American system of education, and I've seen that even with our two sons, one who went to an American university and one who didn't, the spirit of learning is completely different. There, they are taught, how do you go out and do way more? Because that's the nature of the beast. Here too, we are saying, make it accessible and use technology, as Manish rightly said and Chetan said, use technology. However, again, I would like to caution people that there is no silver bullet. The policy that has been put together, I mean, Manish, I think, called it out. I was trying to be polite because my wife always keeps telling me, stop being so aggressive and negative about anything that a government does. So I was trying to be elegant about it. But Manish called it out. It's not about, you may write the most beautiful words. It's how do you translate it? The problem is in the system. The problem is educating teachers to educate our kids. And I'll give you a small example. I remember when our kids were in Vasant Valley in the year dot, our youngest son, I got a letter one day and the teacher said, he's thrown a paper ball at the teacher, at me, physics teacher or whatever. And what are you going to do about it as a parent, blah, 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 etc. So I wrote back saying that, thank you so much. And what would you like us to do? We're happy to crucify him if that's your need. But I just want to say that if you haven't been able to get his attention in class and make sure that the way that you've been teaching physics, and today physics and math and everything can be taught in such wonderful ways, then the fault lies not in the student, but in the teacher. And I don't want to, sort of lay blame only on a particular thing, because it's the system. The system doesn't even allow the teacher to do that. Look at the hawa that has been created between math, sciences, and the liberal arts. Why is there this divide? When we know that to imagine the writing of Space Odyssey 2001, etc., or any of the books. You need imagination. You need science to make it possible. And similarly, for a scientific brain, you need your left and right hand side to be able to. So be able to put that into your curriculum. And I don't see that. I still see this policy, as Manish said, in a particularly set way. We're addressing nationalism and all of the blah, blah, blah of insecurity. 74 years later of independence, we're insecure. Insecure of what? Each other? Communities? What is this insecurity addressing? If we're insecure, well, then go for counseling. Look at mental health issues. Please don't put it into a policy. Because the policy must be something that you're looking into. It needs to be a visionary policy. It needs to be like our constitution that our founding fathers wrote. One of the most visionary documents in the last century, which looked ahead. And unfortunately, it's been tampered time and time again. And unfortunately, again, the education policy does not look at the need of civil rights and therefore duties. And what is your responsibility to yourself, to your family, to society, to country? The rest of it of, go back to your roots, or bullshit. I mean, sorry for this unparliamentary language, but it truly is. And I totally agree with what Manish has said. Unfortunately, the education system continues to fail us. It's failed our students. And that's why you see, and again, apologies for typecasting, when they say a Bihari is incapable of doing, that same person, when he goes to say NASA in America, is able to send a rocket off to space. Give them a platform of equity and possibilities. The world will open up. And technology allows you to do that.
Technology allows a lot of personalized learning, letting everybody express, learn in the way and in the speed and pace that they want. And yes, education policies, formulations, and the way we have issued advisories and the way we have built models, we can all see one thing right now, that the definition of a school, the way we understand it, the way we have defined it, the model it, the way it works, have all been obliterated. They do not exist now. Because in a virtual school, the rules don't exist, discipline doesn't work, fear circuit doesn't work, and the teacher cannot control a class. Only good content can. And when we talk of literature, it's typically a combination of stories. So keep finding good stories that engage the kids or the children or the community around you in the right kind of direction and with the right content. Thank you so much, Sanjay ji. And I think Manish ji is getting a lot of agreement from a lot of people. Let's now hear a perspective.
Add one thing, Daksh, into this. I think, again, those people from Rajasthan will know very well. The whole oral storytelling tradition is quite different than the text. And I think what's fundamental is we were, in a sense, this is where kind of global colonization happened, not even for us, but even worse for the people in the West, that this kind of freezing a text and freezing a moral of the story. Sanjay was referring it, but I want to bring it out much more. The whole idea of schooling, you read any story and they tell you what's the moral of the story. But the one that you can make a moral, that's a horrible story. Because the best stories have multiple interpretations, multiple meanings, multiple layers. And the oral storytelling tradition, actually, every time you heard a story, there would be shifts to the story. There would be multiple layers of meaning behind the story. And I think we have such rich, that's what we have to reclaim, not trying to copycat, but actually going in where we have rich stories. The whole tradition, for example, of riddles, when I'm part of some groups which talk about how to deal with complexity in the world and all the changes. Riddles are a tremendous way to stretch your mind out and to start to look at nonlinear relationships and connections between things. So I would just want to say is that we have these things, we need to go deeper to understand them. And the story, and let go of this whole thing of trying to come to one moral, one right answer, because majority of life is how to navigate the gray. And I think that's what literature, the best literature, helps us to actually see that there are many ways to understand and respond to challenges we face in life.
I just want to add to what Manish said, Daksh. There are many truths. And today, unfortunately, we're being peddled that there's either one truth or the other. You're either with us or against us. That's not true of life or of story. And again, what he said earlier, you have to teach people to fail, because it's from failure that you will learn. And I know Chetan has been working on also, unfortunately, media, we're looking at media itself has been trying to push a particular truth from a particular channel down everybody's throat, which is not necessarily, and hopefully one of the things that Chetan and his new role in his new ongoing enterprise is going to push back on that hatred and this thing about there's only one or the other truth. That's not true. There are many.
The diversity of truth.
Just to add one more thing related to this is that, since we're talking about media, let us shift from media consumers to media creators. This is what I think is the power we have. I know many kids I work with, they're creating amazing stories. They're making their own videos. They're making their own, all kinds of things. And so rather than giving assignments which are based on consuming stories or encourage that space for more and more storytelling, going even to, whenever someone gets stuck, I said, go and find some grandparents. Go and ask them. They'll tell you all kinds of stories, Even we have something called the Jail University going on. So a lot of young people who want to learn filmmaking and storytelling. I said, here, go into the jail and ask those inmates. You'll get all kinds of stories there. So there's all these other spaces we can learn, look around where we're full of stories. So literature is one piece, but we're surrounded by it. And it's just a question of asking the right questions again, creating that space for listening. And lots of people will want to tell you stories.
Giving them the liberty to question and actually going into spaces which are unexplored, finding new ways to learn and finding new content all around us. Thank you so much, Manish ji, and thank you so much, Sanjoy ji. There's one guest who, due to some technical issue, could not speak. So now let's listen it from somebody who adds the daily news tadka to our newspapers every single morning. He's somebody who adds the Rajniti perspective to it, the Shiksha perspective to it, and who has very strong opinions on a lot many things, is very much interested in literature. And yahan se I would take the discussion to a much more heartfelt language. अब से कोशिश करेंगे कि थोड़ी देर हम हिंदी में बात करें, बिकॉज हम शायद उनका एक्सप्रेशन हिंदी में सबसे अच्छे तरीके से सुन और समझ पाएंगे, और शायद वो अपनी स्पिरिट जो वो कहना चाह रहे हैं उसको सबसे परफेक्ट तरीके से हमारे पास पहुंचा पाएंगे. अगला मैं इनवाइट करता हूं त्रिभुवन जी को, हु इज द एडिटर ऑफ दैनिक भास्कर उदयपुर. त्रिभुवन जी, वेरी वार्म वेलकम आपका ऑन द ब्लब वर्ल्ड वेब टॉक्स 83rd एडिशन. अगले 4-5 मिनट आपके लिए प्लीज.
अपने यहाँ मनीष जी जैसे, संजय जी जैसे और जो दूसरे साथी लोग हैं, वो देश और दुनिया के बारे में और शिक्षा के बहुत सारे अनुभव उनके पास हैं. लेकिन मुझे एक बात कहनी है, क्योंकि मैं जब ग्राउंड पर स्कूलों में जाता हूँ, चाहे वो प्राइवेट स्कूल हों, चाहे वो सरकारी स्कूल हों, चाहे वो कॉलेजेस हों, यूनिवर्सिटीज हों, तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि लोग एक बात से बहुत ज़्यादा परेशान हैं. अभी हमारे बीच में 2 लोग खास तौर से मौजूद हैं यहाँ, जिनको मैं व्यक्तिगत रूप से जानता हूँ. एक मनीष जी हैं और दूसरे संजय जी हैं. संजय जी ने जयपुर में लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल के नाम से एक बहुत बड़ा एक साहित्य का आंदोलन खड़ा कर रखा है, जो दुनिया भर में बहुत प्रसिद्ध हो गया है और दुनिया में लोग उसको जानते हैं. तो मेरा ये कहना है कि क्या वो किसी नीति के तहत या सरकार की नीति से बना है, या मनीष जी जिस तरह का मॉडल बिल्कुल शिक्षा के एक समांतर मॉडल लेकर के आए हैं, क्या वह किसी शिक्षा की नीति या क्या कोई सरकार उसको सोच सकती थी? मुझे लगता है यह संभव नहीं था. और जो चीज संभव है वो ये है कि लोगों को अपनी शिक्षा की नीतियां बनाने के लिए स्वतंत्र छोड़ देना चाहिए, क्योंकि वो अपनी अगर नीति बनाएंगे, लोग अगर अपनी नीति बनाएंगे, लोग अगर अपने एजुकेशन का मॉडल लेके आएंगे कि वो बच्चों को क्या पढ़ाना चाह रहे हैं, किस तरह से पढ़ाना चाह रहे हैं, तो मुझे लगता है बहुत सारे वैज्ञानिक हमारी दुनिया में पैदा हो सकते हैं, बहुत सारे कलाकार हमारी दुनिया में आ सकते हैं, बहुत सारे साहित्यकार आ सकते हैं, नाटककार आ सकते हैं, बहुत सारी तरह के जो टेक्निकल जो वैज्ञानिक हैं वो आ सकते हैं. तो जो आज की दुनिया है, उस दुनिया में उनका जो अनुभव है वो अपनी तरह का है. अभी जो मैं शिक्षा नीति का जो डॉक्यूमेंट जो है, पूरा दस्तावेज पढ़ रहा था, इसमें कोई ऐसी चीज नहीं है जो दुनिया में बेहतरीन होने वाली मौजूद नहीं है. और आज तक जितनी शिक्षा की नीतियां बनी हैं उन सभी में यही चीजें रही हैं. तो जो चीज प्रस्तुत हम करते हैं उसमें तो कोई कमी नहीं छोड़ते, लेकिन जो वास्तविक कमी हमारे सामने आती है वो कमी आती है हमारे उसको जमीन पर उतारने में. तो जब हम देखते हैं कि इतने सारे शिक्षा के माध्यम से, इतनी नैतिकताओं और धर्म की बातों के माध्यम से, इतने वैल्यूज की बातों के माध्यम से हम एक सिस्टम खड़ा करते हैं और उसके बाद में भी हमारा देश या हमारा समाज जो है वो भ्रष्टाचार है, सांप्रदायिकता है, जातिवाद है, बेरोजगारी है या इस तरह की बहुत सारी समस्याओं से जूझता है। तो मेरा निवेदन इसमें ये है कि लोगों को हम जो है उनको सिर्फ जो जरूरी चीजें हैं सरकार वहीं तक नियंत्रित करे और वो नियंत्रण मुक्त करे, समाज स्कूलों को भी करे। जैसे अस्पतालों पर आज कोई ज्यादा नियम लागू नहीं है या और बहुत सारे ऐसे मीडिया अपने आप में स्वतंत्र है, उनकी अपनी एक एथिक्स है। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जो शिक्षा के लोग हैं उनकी अपनी एक एथिक्स होनी चाहिए, उनकी अपनी नीति होनी चाहिए, वो अपने तौर तरीकों से पढ़ाएं, वो अपने तरह से पढ़ाएं, वो शिक्षक को जितना पैसा ज्यादा से ज्यादा देना चाहें, बच्चे को जिस तरह से बेहतरीन तरीके से पढ़ा सकें, तो उससे मुझे लगता है कि एक मॉडल खड़े बहुत सारी तरह की बेहतरीन चीजें आ सकती हैं। और सरकार जो जो चीज जिसको उसको वैज्ञानिक चाहिए, उसको ब्यूरोक्रेट चाहिए, उसको जिस भी तरह की नौकरियों के लिए, पुलिस के लिए, किसी भी तरह के रोजगार के लिए जो लोग चाहिए, वो उसकी अपनी अनिवार्यता, अपनी शिक्षा के मानदंड जो हैं, जो न्यूनतम मानदंड है, वो लागू करे और उनको बहुत सख्ती से लागू करे और लोग अपनी तरह से इनको पढ़ाएं। तो मुझे लगता है कि कहीं हमारी शिक्षा की नीति जो है वो बहुत कारगर हो सकती है। जहां तक मैं देखता हूं कि जैसे कुछ उदाहरण है हमारे पास कि किस तरह से हमारे समाज में बहुत 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 ज्यादा प्रतिभाएं और बहुत ज्यादा कलात्मकताएं मौजूद हैं। जैसे जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल के माध्यम से इतने लोग सामने आ गए जिनकी हम कल्पना नहीं कर सकते थे। तो जो हालात जिस तरह के रहे हैं, उन हालात में ये देखिए कि जो सबसे बड़ा आज का शस्त्र है AK-47 जो है, वो क्लाशिनिकोव जो है, जब रूस का एक सिकलीगर बनाता है और उसको सरकारी सपोर्ट मिलता है, मदद मिलती है, तो वो एक अद्भुत चीज पैदा कर देता है। और हमारे यहाँ के सिकलीगर को हम जेल में डाल देते हैं कि वो अवैध हथियार बना रहा है। हमारे यहाँ बेहतरीन तरह की शराबें बनाने वाले लोग रहे हैं, और लेकिन जब सरकार चलाती है तो वो इस तरह का एक सिस्टम जो है वो बनाती है कि वो उनको हम क्रिमिनल्स के अंदर शामिल कर देते हैं। हमारे यहाँ लुहार हैं जो लोहे का पता नहीं क्या क्या कैसी कैसी सुंदर वस्तुएं चीजें बनाते हैं, लेकिन वो मारे मारे फिर रहे हैं, वो आज तक कभी शिक्षा से नहीं जुड़ पाए। ये जो शिक्षा नीति है इसमें कुछ चीजें दिखावटी तौर पे जोड़ी गई हैं कि बच्चों की बात नहीं है, आप पूरे समाजों को किस तरह से जोड़ पाएंगे, उनको किस तरह से करेंगे, स्कूलों को उनकी अपनी कैसे स्वतंत्रता देंगे, किस तरह से छूट देंगे, उनको कैसे बताएंगे कि एक रेशनल और ह्यूमनिस्ट जो नागरिक है वो पैदा करें। हम एक आज जिस दौर में रह रहे हैं वो पोस्ट ग्लोबलाइजेशन का एरा है। ग्लोबलाइजेशन की प्रक्रिया पूरी हो चुकी है और दुनिया किसी और दूसरे दौर में जा रही है, और हमारे जो पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम जो है वो हमें कहीं और ले जा रहा है। तो हमारी जो शिक्षा है, जब तक राजनेताओं और ब्यूरोक्रेट्स से मुक्त होकर के शिक्षा के लोगों के हाथ में नहीं आएंगी, तब तक मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि हम एक बेहतर समाज, बेहतर अच्छे स्कूल, बेहतरीन नागरिक नहीं पैदा कर पाएंगे। तो मुझे ये बहुत भरोसा है कि मनीष जी जैसे लोग या संजय जी जैसे लोग जिन्होंने अपने मॉडल खड़े किए हैं और जिन्होंने बताया है कि बिना किसी सरकार की मदद के या बिना किसी नीति के, उन लोगों ने अपनी नीतियां ला करके और अपने तौर तरीकों से एक बहुत बेहतरीन समाज खड़ा कर दिया, एक बेहतरीन एक शिक्षा की एक मीनार खड़ी कर दी है। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जो हमारे स्कूल हैं, मैं कंक्लूड कर रहा हूँ, हमारे जो स्कूल हैं, हमारी जो विश्वविद्यालय हैं, उनको स्वतंत्र कर देना चाहिए और उन पे कोई नीति लागू करने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। लोग नीति अपने आप बना लेंगे, क्योंकि जो लोग नीति लागू कर रहे हैं वो नीति नहीं लागू कर रहे, वहां से अनीति आ रही है, वहां से प्रेशर्स आ रहे हैं, दबाव आ रहे हैं, और वो जो दबाव है वो कहीं शिक्षा उसमें मर रही है। पहले जो बच्चा 11वीं करके कॉलेज जा सकता था, अब उसमें आपने अड़ंगा लगा दिया कि वो 12वीं करेगा। फिर आपने बीएड जो है वो 6 महीने की थी, 9 महीने की थी, साल भर की थी, 2 साल की, अब आप कह रहे हैं कि बीएड 4 साल की होगी। यानी कि बेरोजगारी का जो आंकड़ा है वो आपका कम से कम हो सके, इसलिए आप लोगों को स्कूलों के घेरे में शिक्षा की और डिग्रियों के उस दौर ज्यादा से ज्यादा कैसे नष्ट हो। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है, मैं जो है ये कहना चाहूंगा कि जो हमारे स्कूल, हमारे विश्वविद्यालय हैं, उनको शिक्षा के लोगों के है उन पर छोड़ देना चाहिए कि वो किस तरह से, जैसे राजनेता अपने ढंग से अपनी राजनीति करते हैं, उस पर कोई नियम लागू नहीं है, कोई कानून लागू नहीं है। ठीक इसी तरह से क्यों नहीं हम शिक्षा को मुक्त कर सकते? क्यों वहां बार बार नीति लागू करने की बातें करते हैं और उनको ऐसी चीजों में बांधते हैं जिससे वो बने? मुझे लगता है कि इनको स्वतंत्र किया जाना चाहिए और ये बहुत खराब स्थिति है कि हम उनको बहुत सारी तरह के कानूनों और इन चीजों में बांधते हैं। सरकार अपने स्कूलों में जो नीति लागू करना चाहती है वो उनमें करे, तो जो निशुल्क जो पढ़ना चाहेंगे, जो बेहतरीन शिक्षा सरकार दे सकती है वो सरकार दे, और एक पैरेलल सिस्टम जो है, जो समाज का अपना सिस्टम है या जिनको हम कह रहे हैं कि जो धनवानों का अपना सिस्टम है, वो अपने तौर तरीके से पढ़ाएं। तो मुझे लगता है कि एक कॉम्पिटिटिव, एक तीसरे ट्रस्ट बन करके एक और बीच का रास्ता निकल सकता है जो पुराने समय में हमारे यहाँ मौजूद था, और वो दोनों के बीच में संतुलन बना रहता था। तो मेरा ये मानना है कि शिक्षा को इन बंधनों से मुक्त करके एक नए दौर में ले जाना चाहिए, ताकि जिस तरह से जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल जैसी कोई चीज पैदा हुई, या मनीष जी जैसे लोग जो हैं ये अपनी तरह से एक अलग साहसिक कदम उठा रहे हैं, वो उन्होंने अपने मॉडल खड़े किए हैं। तो मैं ये सोचता हूँ कि ये बात बहुत जरूरी है।
थैंक यू सो मच त्रिभुवन जी, धन्यवाद। आपने जो पर्सपेक्टिव दिया टू गिव इट अ समराइजेशन एंड ट्राइंग टू मेक अ पिक्चर फॉर एवरीबॉडी हु डज नॉट गेट हिंदी, इज he's trying to say that let education be liberated. Don't try to bring more and more regulations to it, because regulations or policies or advisories won't improve it. The executioners would. The people who are fighting that fight every single day, they can and they will. Give them the freedom to decide. Let them have an opinion of their own. Let them test models. Let them experiment. From Manish ji's self-designed learning to even self-motivated and self-designed teaching and education. That's something that must be promoted. Thank you so much, Tribhuvan ji, आपके amazing से perspective के लिए, on which comes from real life scenarios and real life experimented successful models like a Jaipur Literature Festival, and amazingly successful models of multiversities and Swaraj University like models that comes from Manish ji, which is again an open university sort of thing where you design your own curriculum, decide what you want to learn and how you want to learn it and from whom do you want to learn it. So you get all the power to decide. One of the questions that has come to me, which is typically for Chetan ji, is teachers right now are facing the camera every single day, and उनकी camera sensibility ना कभी develop की गई है, ना उनके वो curriculum में था, वो अभी एक ऐसा काम कर रहे हैं जो उनके syllabus में नहीं था, तो उन्हें पता ही नहीं है कि what should they be doing in front of a camera, because they are not able to engage kids, और वो अभी एक नए तरीके की बदमाशियां, एक नए तरीके के mischiefs देख रहे हैं every single day. And I would admit on this very platform, one of the leading schools of India, I would not name them, from Mumbai, they shared that they had to stop online classes just after 7 days of starting them, because the kids were so tech savvy that they had amazing digital pranks happening in each class. So with this point, what do you think a teacher now needs as a skill set to face the camera and do virtual teaching? Over to Chetan ji.
I think the first thing is to ensure that you have your face on camera. Most of the teachers are not able to do that, right? I can see they're always fidgeting with the instrument. So at least remind yourself that you've got to put your video on as a start, and also unmute yourself. Secondly, for instance, I'm sorry to sound this way, but Swapna Man is out there. I think that frame is something that's improper, right? Because if Swapna Man, if you can look straight to the camera, straight up ahead, Swapna Chatterjee ma'am, if you can listen to me, if you put the camera at your eye level and look straight, then I would not be seeing that air condition on top of it, which is right now disturbing me, right? So I'm looking at the air conditioner, I'm not looking at you. It's as simple as that. So if you just look at yourself, and I'm looking straight on the camera, and plus I'm looking at myself where I am, right? Now, if you see, I've chosen a background which Sanjoy would appreciate, because it looks rather literary, a lot of books behind me, right? So it gives me that sense of a halo. This is semantics, for instance. I mean, I may not have read half these books, but at least it looks good, right? Well, jokes apart, I think the important thing is, you just look at yourself and see how you're looking. You look straight into the camera as if you're looking into the eyes of another person. That's as simple as it is, right? And if you've chosen not to look at the eyes of a person and talk to him, which means you're not being honest with that person. So just the way you make eye contact with the person, make eye contact with the camera in front of you. That's as simple as it is. And just keep it at your eye level, right? And once you look at that, look at whatever is behind you, it should be something that doesn't disturb, or at least something that's meaningful or adds value. That's as simple as that is. Let me just, if I may quickly respond to what Tribhuvanji said and a few other comments made earlier, which I did. Tribhuvanji did talk about the thing about zamini तौर पे जो चीजें होनी चाहिए. कुछ देर पहले भी मैंने उस implementation की जो बात की थी वो वही बात की थी. उन्होंने एक बड़ा अच्छा मुद्दा बताया रोजगारी से जुड़ा हुआ, right? About the need to employ. Why are we educating our people? Is it employability? And if one of the fundamental reasons in a country, half of which is still unemployed, and unemployment is at a 45-year high, is employment, then the change does not come from the education system. It comes from the employment mechanism. Because if they change the way they start employing people, education will force to be changed to align itself with the way you employ people. Right? So if it's a demand that pulls the supply, not the supply that pushes demand. So if I, as a CEO of a company, choose that, look, I'm going to benchmark myself and I'm going to get a person who I interact with him and he has a liberated mind, which will foster creativity. Or he has the mind, as what Sanjoy talked about, of having a sense of joy within. He's going to create a sense of joy within my organization. I'll employ him. Rest everything else is a technical process. So you've got to alter that. The way corporate India thinks of employment is the way the education system has to be aligned to. That's one thing. Sanjoy asked me as to, I hope, we're getting unbiased sense of journalism in Edumate.tv. So let me assure you, Sanjay, two things which are important. One is when I started Edumate.tv, I chose consciously not to engage with any funds from the government. First thing, right? It'll be a startup with no money coming in from the government. And the second thing is, whenever I talk to people in whatever way in education, there's one letter which I think all of us need to remove from our dictionary, and that's the letter should. The moment we use should, I've heard the word should, this is how the policy should be, this is how that it should be. The fact that you say should is again constraining you. If you remove the word should, you allow things to happen. I just think we're giving too much of importance to the policy more than what it deserves. It has no meaning in our lives. Trust me. As far as I'm concerned, the education policy that was there in the past was the education. I got decent education. I'm pretty happy with the education I got because I chose to educate myself in a particular way. And as far as a classroom is concerned, right, do remember you'll always have some teachers that impacted you much more. Why is that? At the end of it, it was that teacher that chose to work in the same environment to teach you and make an impact on you. He was not looking at the education policy. There was nothing in the framework that restricted him or told him to do this and told him to do that. Nobody's stopping anybody. Trust me, there's a high level of freedom in this country. The fact is that we are exchanging ideas in a free mantle. Who's stopping us? Yeah. So it's very important to understand that education also has to have a sense of engagement at an individual level. And that's why I insist that the teachers need to be trained. Because if you have conscientious teachers, right, through their art of storytelling and engagement, they are the ones who are going to take the country forward. It's not going to be a policy. Let's be very clear. And learning is not a function of teaching, please. The core of learning is an acronym which I say, where C stands for conversations and chats, O stands for observations, R stands for reading, and E stands for experiences. If you have a combination of that's where education stems from. It's not going to be in a classroom, as what Manish said very clearly. Take it out of the classroom. That's the way it has to be. I mean, I've learned 3-4 points talking to you. I'm not in a class. I've taken away so many brilliant points from Manish, from Sanjoy, from Tribhuvan. This is my learning. It's coming from a conversation. It's coming from my observation. If I were telling Swapna ji that this is the way you put yourself in front of a camera, I'm sure she would have had some takeaways. That's an observation. And what we're sharing are experiences. So if you come down to the core, right, you will liberate just the way what Manish is doing at his the brilliant move in his university. just the way Sanjoy is doing with those underprivileged kids, right? And just the way what Tribhuvanji was talking about, as a journalist needs to be done. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Chetanji. So I've got a lot of questions that have come in, but the time is nearly up. So before this comes to an end, there's one small, two questions rather I would want an answer from all of you as a closing statement for this whole discussion. India as a country is struck by a disease that we call certification, and we do not judge capabilities. So how do we shift this mental understanding, structure, and mentality of the society around us, and specifically of the parents, that shift your focus from certifications to capabilities? One is this question, and the second and most important, which ones or two skills would you accredit to your friends for teaching you, or what did you learn from your peers in your school, any skill that you still use and you got from your school friends? So anyone from you can start. The answer to your question, I would suggest if we could have the first answer from Sanjoy ji.
Sorry, Daksh, the first part of your question got distorted. So just repeat the first question, the second question I got.
Yeah, so as a nation, as a country, as parents, as a society, we are obsessed with certifications and we do not go by capabilities. So how to do this mental shift in the communities around us?
Again, I think it's exactly what Manish said, and Chetan has sort of talked about it, Tribhuvanji has talked about it. At the end of the day, whatever we learn in school or college is pretty useless in this present curriculum process. I've studied philosophy, I've studied whatever in my university, I've studied all of the subjects, including math, in my school days. And for the record, in my 11th standard school exam, I got 4% in my math 11th standard board, whatever it's called. Today, I sit on a math consortium as one of its advisors. So, and at that point of time, the hawa around math was such that I refused to go to that math class because I thought the teacher was just, didn't understand math itself. And certainly by not understanding couldn't teach us. But today one can understand it because it's the way you use it. If you don't understand the way algorithms are to be processed, you're not going to do very much. So you have to, it's a practical based need today rather than a hawa of what is math going to do or not do. What do we learn? Again, I'm going back to what Chetan and Manish said. What do we learn? We learn much more from each other. If you see your parents giving back to society, you will learn that. If you see your parents speaking rudely to your house help, you will learn that. If you make a divide between the person, your chowkidar, say, for example, and you, and say, come in, or you can't come into my house, or whatever it is, that's what you will learn. I think the most important thing is to be able to treat people with empathy and with equality. And, all of us come from back. I remember my grandmother's, or my great grandmother saying, and she was a formidable woman who bathed in milk and cream and honey. And she used to say, the shadow of a Muslim shouldn't fall on the outer wall of our home. And yet my parents and my grandparents always taught us, a completely different idiom, that you must treat people alike. And our teaching, whether it was in the UK or in Bombay or in Delhi or wherever else, allowed for that kind of thing. And I will end with an example of St. Stephen's College, so, which is where I did my university education, Delhi University. In Stevens, for the first year, I didn't go to class. I was spending too much of time protesting or going to prison or being in jail or wherever one, in the beginnings of your university career, that's what you do. And I wanted to drop out of university. I wanted to go out and help the world, etc. Till my brother one day came to me and he said, the only place that you'll be throwing a bomb is from an air-conditioned car, because, and remember, villages don't have, village huts don't have air conditioning. But at the end of the year, Vijay Tanka, who was one of our professors at St. Stephen's College, some of you may know him, Tanks, as he was known, send me a note saying, every student needs attendance, so you better come and shoot for a film that I'm doing, and I'll give you attendance. And when we agreed on the trade, and I did shoot for his film, you know, it immediately created an association between me and him, and therefore between me and the faculty. This was in February of that year. March, as you know, university exams in the first year start. I went on to top university mostly every year, not because of what I studied in the class, but because the way my university lecturers, Dr. Vijay Tankar, Dr. Vora, Dr. Gupta, and what they had you imbibe. My teacher in my last year when I shifted to Delhi, I went to Delhi Public School. My teacher, she wasn't my teacher, she was the head of theater and literature, Mrs. Krishnan, Prem Krishnan, who's still at 94 or 95. I'm so closely attached to. She wrote her first dirge, her first ballad, and which we released at the Jaipur Literature Festival 2 years ago at the age of 92. My teacher in Cathedral and John Convent School in Bombay was Vijaya Ghosh. She was my class teacher who threw me out of class because I was playing chess in my, in one of her classes. So it's not about what you learn. It's about what is the influence that these people have on you, and what do you then translate that into being. That's the important thing. You have to, as Chetan said and Manish said, and Tribhuvan said, you have to do this through, in many ways, through osmosis. You see, you hear, you learn, you acknowledge, and therefore then, I mean, what I know today, I didn't know when I was a kid. Every year you learn. I'm surprised sometimes that one knows so much. I keep wondering, ye kahan se mujhe? But it's from conversations, it's from discussions, it's from somebody else that you keep assimilating knowledge and information. It's not the curriculum per se.
A lot of learning happens beyond curriculums, and it's mostly casual learning, which all of us see within the students, within the kids that we see around. And that casual learning stopped during this lockdown. And we have, a lot of kids in solitude. And we now need to think of...
Sorry, rather than saying casual learning, I'd use the word experiential learning.
Experiential learning.
And experiential learning is far more, as Manish would have in his teach at home program. I think that's the issue. It's not about casual, because it's not casual. You may wish to take your kids to Athens or Egypt or Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or wherever you're taking your kids. It may be a casual night out or day out or whatever, but it is experiential learning. You take them into a village, it's experiential learning. And I'm sorry, I'm going to take a little bit more time. Every year, the Jaipur Literature Festival, we bring 60 children together, 30 from NGOs in and around, Dusra Dashak, etc. 30 from the St. Xavier's, MGD schools, etc. So in that first day, all of the posh school children look at the other kids, with their nose in the air. Matlab, we don't mix with these kind of kids. By the end of that 1 week workshop program, which is 8 hours a day, those other kids become their heroes, because these kids from the St. Xavier's or MGDs could never imagine the experience that these kids living in their villages have. And every year, this has happened now for 12 years, the key theme of that workshop gets assigned by the kids from these other economically challenged schools, not from the St. Xavier, because they have limited experiences. You and I, in our philosophical armchair, or in my case, I'm a sofa today in my Goa house, we have very limited experiences given the others. Our street kids in Salam Balak Trust can sell you, me, Manish, Swapna ji and Tribhuvan 3 times over, and we won't even know about it. And that's why when we've given them a platform, we have an aeronautical engineer, we have Vicky Roy, whose work is in every museum across the world and is on TED Talk formal, the big TED Talk stuff, etc. And so many entrepreneurs. All we need to do is allow for experiential education. That's the most important thing. ये करिकुलर शरिकुलर पॉलिसी, NEP, NEC, हम्टी डम्टी, HRD जैसे आप लोगों ने कहा, जैसे त्रिभुवन जी ने कहा, all of that is very very good and fine and so on and so forth. नीति क्या है, intent क्या है? And until and unless we question intent and niti and look forward, we have to look ahead. It's like this whole hawa of, what's that, every month they keep releasing, easy to do business in India, whatever that ranking is, bullshit. Try setting up a company. Somebody was weeping to me the other day, in this time of COVID, they were going to make a 30 crore investment. नाक में दम लगा रखा है उत्तराखंड में उनको. छोड़िए ये सब कि ये भी होगा वो भी होगा, कुछ नहीं होता. We are who we are. Let's move forward.
Thank you so much, Sanjoy ji. And yes, experiential learning, not casual learning. ये casual learning word हम लोग webinar में बहुत दिनों से बहुत सारे principles use कर रहे थे. So it became a part of vocabulary. But yes, experiential learning is what it is. And let's now have the thoughts of Manish ji on what skill do you still carry जो आपने शायद आपके स्कूल में सीखी होगी. And what do you think would be the most critical understanding mentality change that you would think the society needs right now?
So I think, as I said, most of the things I've learned, my friend, but what's been some of the most profound things is, one is all rules are meant to be broken. So I think I learned that, my friends, and when you break those rules, break them well. Don't do it either with a hodgepodge, but really take the risk and try to do something with that. And so ye mujhe ek cheez hai. And dusra, I think, is the skill which I learned with my friends is the idea of, I would say, in these days it's a fashionable word, but prototyping. This was 50 years ago I started doing with my friends. Just start. I find young people worried about too many things and planning too many things and ye hoega. Whatever you're interested in, just start, try to create a prototype of it. That will give you so much learning on how to do things and how to keep moving forwards with your dreams. So I think that's, since I was 10, I started my first business when I was 10 years old with some of my friends, and we just started it up. We didn't plan and think so much, but just by doing it again and experiencing it, so much learning started to come. It was my first, I would say my first MBA was when I was 10 years old. And life and just the neighborhood that gave me that experience. I'm just recognizing the time, so I want to speak more. But I just want to say one other thing is that in our university, we actually don't believe in degrees and diplomas. So we think that the people who need degrees and diplomas, they have to keep looking at that paper because they're not confident in what they learned. But people who have gone through deep experiential learning processes, you can see the confidence in your eyes. If you talk to any of my, we call them kojis, our learners, they're kojis. If you talk to any of the kojis, they can talk hours and hours and hours about their different experiments, their different experiences, and with such confidence that it's not, they're not just faking, they're not faking it. They're actually really have done things. And so we have found that more and more employers, as I think Chetan ji was referring to, more and more employers are appreciating that. They're looking for people who have taken experiences. And we found that many of them are willing now to hire. If you look at even globally, companies like Google, Tesla, they have removed degree requirements from their hiring process because it thinks it's a useless piece of paper. And I think more and more Indian leaders are also opening up to this possibility. We have hundreds of them who have agreed to look at prefer asking people for their portfolio of experiences, and is much more important than that. So I would invite us to look at that. And the last thing I just want to make a plug is that we are actually right now this year promoting that students take a gap year, and not as a year off, but as a year on. And to try to really experience many other possibilities rather than, I think it's a human rights violation to force children to sit in front of a screen for 7 hours a day for the entire year. This is going to create all kinds of mental health issues and problems for children. In the US, they talk about this as nature deficit disorders. The more and more time children are in screens is creating all kinds of psychological disorders. So this is a great year to actually think of all the kinds of creative things we can think about and take a year, a gap year from school and explore so many other, and schools can promote this. I think this, I just wanted to conclude, the best thing I found about the NEP is a language that is saying that it's going to be much more easier to move in and out of the system, much more flexibility. So go and experience life. You know, Sanjay was sharing, he could have gone, if that was there, he could have gone, explored for a year, come back to the university, all kinds of things. I did that in my own experiences, and it really brings so much power. You know, in the US, most of the Ivy League institutions have put out a circular. They prefer people who have taken a gap year, who have gone out and explored the world, because those people come with a rich base of experiences that is real, that they can bring into the classroom, that they can share with their peers, that they can engage with the assignments in more depth. So I think this, again, just highlighting the need of the hour is really much more experiential learning, and the space of creativity. Creativity, when, you know, this is, you know, in some ways I feel like if you go back and read Gandhiji and Vinobaji and Tagore, they said this already 100 years ago. So the more relevant question to ask is not what should happen, but why isn't it happening? What are the blocks, and how do we start to shift out of those? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Manish. The real question is to ask that why is it not happening, and what, rather than what should be happening. So before we conclude, Tribhuvan ji, the last 1 minute is yours for a concluding statement. अगर आप कुछ बोलना चाहें आखिरी 1 मिनट में त्रिभुवन जी, तो
मैं एक चीज कहना चाहूंगा कि कोई व्यक्ति जो है वो किसी होटल में जाता है, खाना खाता है, तो मैं मेरी शिक्षा कहाँ से लेता हूँ ये सरकार क्यों तय करे? ये तय करे कि आपको इंजीनियर बनने के लिए, आपको डॉक्टर बनने के लिए, आपको जो बनना है, जो आपकी एसेंशियल्स हैं, आप अपनी वो मानदंड तय कर दीजिए कि मुझे इतनी शिक्षा, ये डिग्री, ये सब कुछ उसको आना चाहिए, ये है। अब आपको जैसे मान लो उदाहरण के तौर पे सेना के लिए आप लोग लेते हैं, पुलिस के लिए लेते हैं, तो उसकी फिटनेस जो है वो आप ये थोड़े तय करवाते हैं कि ये फला फिटनेस सेंटर जो है वो वहां से फिटनेस होकर के आएगा, या उसका जो जिम है वो वहां ये करके आएगा। तो मुझे ये ख्याल ही बहुत खराब लगता है बहुत शुरू से, कि ये आप शिक्षा के लिए चीजें तय कर देते हैं लोगों से। कबीर, तुलसी, कालिदास किसने पैदा किए? क्या शेक्सपियर किसी यूनिवर्सिटी में पैदा हुए थे? ये संभव नहीं है। और मुझे लगता है कि ये जो वैज्ञानिक पैदा होना बंद हो गए हैं, ये जो कलाकार पैदा होना बंद हो गए हैं, जो जीनियस लोग, जो जगदीश चंद्र बसु जैसे लोग पैदा नहीं हुए, आइंस्टीन पैदा नहीं हुए, क्यों नहीं हुए? क्योंकि हमने यूनिवर्सिटीज बना दी हैं। हमने एक तरह से शिक्षा को, और जो मतलब नैसर्गिक विकास है उसको रोकने के सारी ताकत झोंक रखी है हमने, कि ये यहाँ ये नहीं पढ़ा दे, ये नहीं कर दे, ये ऐसा क्यों पढ़ा रहा है, ये क्यों पढ़ा रहा है। और आप जो पढ़ाएंगे उसमें से, मतलब इसका एक छोटा सा उदाहरण बताऊंगा आपको, कि हमारे स्वतंत्रता संग्राम जो है उससे जुड़ी झांसी की रानी कविता है, वो हटा देते हैं ये लोग। और हटा के जब लगाते हैं तो उसमें से वो 4 लाइनें हटा देते हैं जो किसी राजनेता के खिलाफ जाती हैं या किसी घराने के खिलाफ जाती हैं। तो आप ये देखिए कि उदाहरण दे रहा हूं मैं, ये जो शिक्षा का दस्तावेज है, शिक्षा नीति है, इसमें हिंदी हमारे कहा गया है कि हमारी जो है, हम बच्चों की भाषा में चीजें पढ़ाएंगे, लेकिन इसमें इतनी गलतियां हैं, खुद इसमें इतनी गलतियां हैं हिंदी भाषा की कि आप कल्पना नहीं कर सकते। तो आप कह रहे हो कि हम शिक्षा नीति तय करेंगे। अरे आप कहां से तय करोगे? आप खुद की स्थिति खराब है, आप करोगे। अब कोई व्यक्ति ये कहे जो डॉक्टर या हॉस्पिटल को नहीं जानता, कि मैं आपका हॉस्पिटल कैसे चलेगा ये बताऊंगा। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये बहुत हम आत्मघाती रास्ते पे जा रहे हैं। ये लोगों ने सिर्फ अपने नियंत्रण का तरीका बना रखा है कि हम हमारे पॉपुलेशन को, उनको नियंत्रित कैसे करें, तो चलो वो स्कूलों में जाएंगे तो हमारे लिए आफत नहीं होगी। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ये चीजें बहुत तरह से, तो ऐसा ये है कि स्कूलों को उनको मुक्त करना चाहिए, और ये शिक्षा उसी से बेहतर बन सकती है। चाहे आप हों, चाहे मनीष जी हों, चाहे संजय जी हों, चाहे दूसरे लोग हों, इवन देश के प्रधानमंत्री हों या राष्ट्रपति हों या किसी इलाके के मुख्यमंत्री, उनको वो शिक्षा किसी भी स्कूल या कॉलेज में नहीं मिली है जहां वो हैं और जिस वजह से हैं। इसलिए ये बहुत जरूरी चीज है कि नैसर्गिक विकास पर ध्यान दिया जाए।
तो लेट थिंग्स ग्रो ऑर्गेनिकली, नैसर्गिक विकास होता रहे, हम वैसे ग्रो करें जैसे हमें समझ में आता हो, अपना डिसीजन मेकिंग, अपना मोटिवेशन एंड हमारा कुरिकुलम, एंड रादर कुरिकुलम ही नहीं, हमारी लाइफस्टाइल जो हम डिफाइन करें खुद. सो दिस हैज बीन अ वेरी लिबरेटिंग काइंड ऑफ अ डिस्कशन, गोइंग बियॉन्ड द एनईपी. हम लोग एनईपी को अनबॉक्स करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, लेकिन यहाँ एनईपी बॉक्स हो गई. इट्स अगेन क्लोज नाउ. वी नीड समथिंग न्यू टू एब्सोल्युटली कम आउट ऑफ इट. So thank you so much people for participating. Before this comes to an end, there's one very important thought or some food for thought that I want to share with all of you, that COVID brought a very new opportunity for everybody. कोरोना ने एक बड़ी नई अपॉर्चुनिटी सबके लिए खोल दी. अगर आप इतिहास में देखेंगे तो ऐसा बहुत कम बार होता है कि आपके आसपास का समाज, आपके आसपास के लोग सुनने को तैयार हो जाते हैं, चीजें एक्सपेरिमेंट करने को तैयार हो जाते हैं. और ऐसा तब होता है जब हम एज अ कम्युनिटी एग्जिस्टेंशियल क्राइसिस फेस करते हैं, और हम अभी वही कर रहे हैं. तो अगर आप जिंदगी में कोई एजुकेशन पे एक्सपेरिमेंट करना चाहते थे या कोई भी एक्सपेरिमेंट करना चाहते थे, तो ये उसका सबसे परफेक्ट टाइम है. सो डोंट स्टॉप योरसेल्फ, स्टार्ट एक्सपेरिमेंटिंग. Thank you so much people. I hope you enjoyed the last 60 minutes that you spent with us. Before we end, Blub World का जो core spirit है, that comes from a single statement, teens inspiring teens. तो ये खत्म हो उसके पहले a very small story about one such teenager who started her painting career at the age of 2, had a sold out show at one of New York's most affluent galleries at the age of 7, was invited by one of the most coveted museums in Europe at the age of 9 to do a big painting show. She right now earns in millions, resides in Melbourne, Australia, and that's the cover page of the Blub World magazine last month. That's Elita Andre, and that's where Blub actually comes from, and that's where our core spirit lies, that don't teach, let's inspire, because that's what you'll need in the coming times. Thank you so much people. I hope you enjoyed the last 60 minutes. Thank you so much for being a part of the Blub World Web Talks 83rd edition. Thank you so much. Namaste.